I think it'll be exciting. At least I certainly hope so.
I feel excited.
We all are. For much of the time this session, as you know, we've seen ideologues at the Capitol setting a tone that seems counter to what the people of Arizona want. Ideologues are holding the legislative process captive. For instance, they're stalling the budget negotiations. They're ignoring efforts to bring more transparency and accountability to state government, passing over opportunities to improve school and community safety. Representative Campbell, for instance, proposed legislation to create safer schools and safer communities. However, none of those bills saw the light of day. Representative Steele from Tucson attempted to get more resources for the mental health first aid program, to increase training opportunities for people who want to be able to recognize and help people experiencing a mental health crisis. This bill got overwhelming support until it moved to the Senate and stalled out. We know that Arizonans want us to be focused on creating jobs, expanding health care, and funding education. Unfortunately, those priorities have been shoved aside to make room for an extremist agenda, and this is what's troubling to us. All of this seemed to come to a head last week, for instance, during the debate about a fictitious United Nations conspiracy and the time wasted on a bill that would allow people to use gold and silver in financial transactions in Arizona. Instead of focusing on ideological issues that are part of an agenda that is not in line with what the people of Arizona want, we need to find a way to bring the discussion back to what will get our state moving forward. I've asked some of our members of the House Democratic Caucus who have insight and perspective and quite a bit of experience on the way the legislature used to operate to discuss what we can learn from what worked in the past as we face the task of passing a budget, debating Medicaid expansion, and reforming the transaction privilege tax. Representative McCune Davis, District 30, is one of the longest serving members of our caucus and an outspoken consumer advocate. Representative Alston, District 24, brings a wealth of institutional knowledge to this discussion. She is also a school board member and a well-known proponent of government transparency. Representative Eric Meyer, District 28, is a medical doctor and a former school board member who has earned a reputation for proposing well-reasoned and substantive legislation. He has also managed to get himself elected twice in a Republican district, so he does have a reputation of being truly bipartisan. I'm going to start by asking the members a few questions, and then we'll open this discussion to questions from the press. Representative McCune Davis, how are the priorities set at the legislature now versus in the past?
Well, let me say that over the number of years that I've been here, this is the first time that I can see that Arizona's citizen priorities are not at the top of the list of the issues that we're addressing as we go forward. I think it's pretty clear that the public has priorities, and for some reason that doesn't parallel. And the things that are coming forward clearly are aligned with the most extreme positions down here. And in the mood of transparency that my colleagues claim to hold dear, I think we're moving, frankly, in the wrong direction. And so puts me in the position of wondering if they're willing to bring these most extreme positions to the floor, things that are counter to the future of this state, things that move in the opposite direction of sustainability and use of our natural resources for the preservation of our communities. What's going on behind closed doors? Who's providing leadership on the issues that are important? And the answer is, we've always known that our Senate president and our speaker have, advisors who kind of push them in a certain direction going forward. And all I have to say is, who are they and where did they come from? They are clearly not aligned with what we need to be doing. The special interests even don't align with the priorities the Republicans set forward, which is about jobs. The bills that we're seeing aren't tied to jobs and evidence of jobs. They're tied to getting another tax break. An example that I'd like to use is my lying lobbyist bill. You've all heard about that one over the years. The circumstances that I've observed where lobbyists basically say whatever it takes to get their bills through, and when confronted with the facts, they backpedal. So this bill puts a penalty in place for doing that. It's a perfect bill for common ground. It did not even get assigned to a committee. So somebody here thinks that what the lobbyists are doing is just fine, and I'd have to suggest that's counter to my observations this session. Bills were introduced to enact recommendations of conservative Republican County Attorney Bill Montgomery from Maricopa County. Where are those bills? They haven't made it to the floor, they haven't been debated, they haven't been discussed. Isn't it time for government to really rise in the eyes of the voters by demonstrating that we want to act with some integrity? I'm concerned because those bills haven't moved forward. And then there are bills that just flat confuse me, like the legal tender bill. I've not yet had a constituent ask me to promote that bill. What in the world is that about? I think we have an obligation to address the real issues in Arizona. We have communities that are dependent on water, on clean air, on good health, on good education. You can continue down the list. Those are not the bills I see moving forward here. I see a whole different agenda. And truthfully, I have to ask the question, where are they coming from?
Thank you, Debbie. Representative Alston, how is the process and priority budget different?
That work?
Oh, that works fine.
Okay,
Great,
great.
thank you.
I have served now 20 years in the legislature, 18 in the House and 2 coming back after a lengthy absence. And each of those years I've been on the Appropriations Committee. And when I came back here, I asked to be on the Appropriations Committee again. And when I arrived, I asked where my budget book was. And even the staff looked at me because they had not heard of a budget book, or many of them had not. And we used to have a book that each Appropriations Committee member had that was about that thick with big line item budgets for every single agency in the state. And what we did, we had subcommittees, a House subcommittee with a matching Senate subcommittee. We would hear the people of the state and what their priorities were in each subcommittee, and a vote was taken at the subcommittee level. After that, all the subcommittee votes went back to the full Appropriations Committee in each house. And another vote was taken. And people could comment, primarily in the subcommittees, but occasionally in the adoption of the big committee. And then House members and Senate members would meet on the floor of the Senate, and the budget recommendations were moved, not line by line, but agency by agency, so that appropriation members had a full and complete understanding of the budget. The citizens of the state had a clear and transparent understanding of the budget if they chose to participate. Everyone had an opportunity at some place in the process to come and speak to their priorities. Now, we get a major department like Department of Economic Security or Department of Health Services or Access on maybe 5 or 6 sheets of blue paper with about 3 sentences about the budget and big gross numbers, not any detail at all. And that's what the Appropriations Committee is given. When we have adopted budgets in the last 2 years, the members of the Appropriations Committee never saw the completed budget until we showed up in committee the day that the budget went out of the House. Never saw it in its final form. Now, where the budget is taking place is in all these small group meetings with Republican-only members, and that's why some very weird stuff gets dropped in, and some other necessary stuff, in my humble opinion, gets knocked out, and votes are being purchased by using the giveaways to the extremists in their caucus to get the votes for the budget. It was really much cheaper and better for our communities when Republicans had to shop in Alfredo's store. So it was transparent. It's very, very different now, and it's not good. We've got major issues like Medicare expansion being debated behind closed doors. In the meantime, we're having small, one hearing in which, the chairman of the Republican Party calls the governor a Judas, and we spend our time in appropriations hearing things like the bathroom bill, which disallows people who are different an opportunity to use public bathrooms. And a lot of fun has been made about that, but that is a huge tragedy and travesty. Those people do not deserve that kind of disrespect by this House and by the Appropriations Committee. It's pitiful, and I'm really sorry, and I'm hoping we can, use our forces to turn it around and put that transparency back in. I have put in a bill for child care subsidies every year since I've been back, because we're not funding that anymore. The directors of homeless shelters and transitional housing for women with children tell me that would be the #1 thing that would help them the most, if those women could be sure that their children were safe while they were able to go to work. Never got a hearing. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Representative Meyer, how would you say the school boards differ from the legislature in that entire process of operation?
Just one correction. You said I'd been in office, elected twice. It's been 3 times, just so it's clear that I'm termed out shortly.
I'll take it.
Served on the Scottsdale School Board for 8 years. And the differences, the biggest difference, and Lela's made a lot of the points already about openness and transparency that we have to abide by as school board members. We have open hearings, our budget, and everything we do is debated and voted on weeks later, so the public has a chance to comment. But I think the biggest frustration for me is having served on a school board where we work to do the right thing for our kids in our district. And here at the legislature, I assumed that when I came into office, we would work to do the right thing for the citizens of our state. And whether that is funding education, expanding Medicaid expansion to cover those that don't have insurance, to fund things like kids care, to fund programs that immunize our kids. I thought we'd come down here and work to do those things. But having been here 5 years now, I've become jaded and feel like what we spend a lot of our time doing is hearing bills that may benefit one person or another in their attempt to move to higher office, which is unfortunate. I give this speech on the floor all the time. Why are we not focusing on what? When I go anywhere now and talk to constituents, I was at the gym this morning, and I can't go. My kids won't go out with me because I'm approached everywhere I go to say, why aren't we focusing on these key issues that face our state, that will make our state successful, that will make our kids successful and keep us safe and healthy. And at this point, I don't know what to say other than we have a system where the people that are now in control focus on moving to their next political office rather than focusing on doing the right thing for our state. So,
thank you. At this point, we'd like to open discussion up to the media. you're clearing your throat.
I guess I'll start this one off. Representative McCune-Davis, you were talking about how we're going in the wrong direction with transparency issues. The lying lobbyist bill obviously doesn't get a hearing. Are there other examples that you'd like to point out?
Well, I think we are really disconnected from public expectations. I think that there are issues that the public has concerns about, and they expect something to happen down here, and then nothing happens. And then they wonder, why we're down here at all. And they frankly wonder what the value is of sending somebody to the legislature to represent them when their issues aren't getting addressed. Probably the interesting comment I've had from citizens over time is they ask, well, do legislators get pay raises? And the answer is yes, when the voters vote for it. But when the public doesn't believe we're doing the job they sent us down here to do, there is no basis for that. And the reason is that we have a very low rating with the public because we don't demonstrate that we meet the needs of Arizona. What I see is transparency for the purposes of the private sector, getting access to information, but not transparency so the public understands the validity of the work that we do or should be doing, and I think that's awful. I think we're not taking a direction that the public expects, that we went through an economic downturn, and the next step that we would be taking would be to restore some of the programs that were cut during that downturn. What I hear in this budget is that none of that restoration is there, and the only area where I see anything even moving in that direction maybe in CPS, but other areas there doesn't seem to be. We'll know when we see the budget and 24 hours later when we vote on it. I think the disconnect is public expectation, and the fact that we don't have accountability and transparency allows lobbyists to get away with things they otherwise couldn't, and I am hearing complaints from new members about the games that are being played that are of concern.
Let me
Anyone
give
in
you.
particular?
What was the question?
Representative Wheeler, any lobbyists in particular, any specific situations you can point to and say, we think a lobbyist was lying here? Because I can think of a few in my head.
Well, what I hear from members is that they're being told that just need to get the bill out of committee because they've got things worked out, that there are amendments coming, that there are agreements. That kind of stuff is going on this session to a degree that we've not seen before. Everything's a work in progress and you never know what the next thing is going to look like. That's not what I'm comfortable voting on. And that's why I think that accountability is critically important. I think when you are told that what you're voting on is going to be changed, or is going to be changed in a way that then doesn't follow through, where in fact that lobbyist takes the bill another direction, is just one example.
If I may disconnect here. We have Representative Campbell introduce comprehensive gun legislation, funding for resources for mental health care, school counselors, background checks, comprehensive with popular support. What are we doing? We have a legislator who urges us now to go look at bulletproof vests and perhaps purchase a bulletproof vest and walk around this chamber, this legislative area, this Capitol, armed with bulletproof vests. That's the disconnect. That's another of many examples of what's going on in this body with the extremists. And that legislator is an avowed Tea Party member, and that's what he's pushing. That's his solution.
And then, so I guess for Representative Alston and McCune-Davis, how has the lobbying world changed since the first time you guys were down here? What's kind of the difference in how lobbyists either approach legislators or do their job of lobbying? Is it different nowadays?
Well, yes, it is. Because when we were here in our early days, your word was your bond. And I can remember sitting in my very first caucus as a new member in the Senate, and the Senate President, Senator Ed Sawyers, saying, of all the advice I can give you, the most important advice is always keep your word. Now, it doesn't mean you can't change your mind, but if you do, it's vital that you go back to whoever you've talked to and make it clear you've changed your mind and changed your vote. The same was true for the lobbyists. Their word was their bond. If they told us something, we could rely on it, we could believe in it, or they just didn't last very long. You know, the word got around, don't trust so-and-so. Now, that's not so much the case, because we have members who aren't real straightforward necessarily, and the same with some lobbyists. Not all, of course, but some.
Yeah, the biggest change that I see is the contract lobbyist who, when they can't get a bill through on its merits, goes out and hires more lobbyists who have relationships with members who then are persuasive not on the proposal, but based on the relationship. And we see a lot more of that going on. And in some cases, hiring people who are not lobbyists, but are willing to accept a fee to then go and talk to a member to sign on as a lobbyist for a specific issue to do that. And some of that's unsettling. It just, you know, the issue of money and sort of acquiring access to power has changed a bit. It's harder to define or to measure, but it's clearly different. We used to know who lobbied for each entity down here, and they took great pride in advancing their proposals. And if it took a year or 2 or 3, that was part of the process. Now there's this acquisition of access that's troublesome to me.
You know, and I think we've, you know, gone too far in our urgency to get things out. That's why we don't get bills out with all the amendments on them and how they should be. You know, we got to get it out, get it out, get it out. Well, now we're not going to get out in 100 days, guys, it doesn't look like. And we need to take our time and be thoughtful and allow for that citizen input. You know, it's rather interesting. In one of the recent Appropriation Committee hearings, one of the there were a lot of people there to talk, and one of the Republican members of the public said, well, I'm a Republican, so I don't have to adhere to the 2-minute rule. And we saw that happen in that committee. People who were against the bill only got 2 minutes. People who were for the bill, that was the chairman's bill or one he supported, went on and on and on and on. So they got all the time they wanted. So even if you get a chance to have a voice, if you're on the wrong side of the issue, then you don't get to put all your points forward. And you're ruled out of order if you repeat something that's already been said. On the other hand, if you're on the right side of the bill, then you can go on and on and on. So
what happened to subcommittees? I had never even, must have been long before my time around.
it was before your time, and occasionally they have them now. I think the Senate had one last year, an appropriations subcommittee on a particular issue. But these were committees like, we had one on transportation, one on education, one on health and welfare, so that those areas were segregated, and they had like committees on each side. You know, we would stay and discuss issues, you know, long into the night. Appropriation members always worked on Friday, so you kind of earned your keep by putting in that extra day. We went on field trips, if you will, around to major state agencies like prisons and hospitals and that sort of thing for in weeks prior to the session starting. And you know, I don't know when the subcommittees went away, but it's been sometime within the last 15 or 16 years. But it worked very well because it spread out the work, and people had, if they had an interest in health and welfare, transportation, whatever the issue, they could go and present their case, and the members could come and listen if they were interested. So I thought it was a really good system. It required more work from Appropriations Committee members, but I think that's our responsibility.
Debbie, did you have?
And is there any way to like bring that back? I mean, every year, even Republicans will complain about the small
Yeah.
group meetings.
Well,
But these
there
are
was
just
a
kinda house
Republican
rules,
that
right?
complained a couple of years ago about how we don't have the information when I mentioned subcommittees and they'd never heard of it. Of course we can bring it back. It's the prerogative of the chairs.
In
the
fact,
leadership.
if we have a Democratic majority in the House, we'll guarantee
We
we'll
will
bring
have
it
them
back.
back.
How's that?
Before Eric turns
it's on our
out.
campaign trail.
Before Eric.
It's on our
turns out.
platform.
And let me comment, because as a member who didn't serve on appropriations, but who observed the process at that time, I knew whether an agency was getting its needs met, or whether it was a component of that agency was adequately funded. I knew that information because that was discussed in a public forum that I could go and sit in on. I could go back and track the record. I cannot tell you that today. I cannot tell you if any agency is actually having their needs met based on the workload and the statutory requirements that that agency has.
Lela, Debbie, Eric, thank you very much. Members of the media, thank you.
That